The herd of foals dashed their way through the snowy lane into the town of Ponyville and exploded into all directions as soon as they hit the first major artery of the eastern edge of town. Some ran home, others ran to parents or loved ones out doing last-minute holiday shopping. But each pony, one and all, ran on fueled by its shared desire, the desire to buy one of Diamond Tiara's 12 remaining kittens, and have the bestest, most adorablest hearts-warming ever. Dinky Doo was with the larger of the splinter groups as she hustled her tiny tush dead ahead into the heart of Ponyville. She wasn't running for home, and her mama wasn't out shopping, no. Today was a work day like any other. She ran past Elm, where her house was. She ran past Pine and its 9 tiny bridges that crisscrossed the small river that separated the town. She turned down Oak, the street named for the old library that burned down and then was subsequently rebuilt. And that new library was all decked out from hall to hall in its holiday finery with magical blinking lights and tinsel both hanging from its mighty bows. But the new library didn't stand out from its neighboring homes and shops other than being a giant tree, because it seemed that every building's hearts-warming decorations were bigger and brighter than the last. Running further down Oak, she passed 2 familiar mares, her mama's friends, Miss Heartstrings and Miss Bond, who were engaged in a shouting match about the right way to store the firewood outside of their home, bark side up or bark side down. She hurried past them and hung a right down Main Street, finally separating from the last of her fellow classmates as Button Mash hurried down Oak, where his house was just a few blocks away. Moments later, Dinky slid to an icy stop in the crowded market that lay at the heart of Ponyville and wrapped itself like a crescent moon around the old town hall. Crowded wasn't a strong enough word for it. The place was packed. Ponies of all shapes and sizes filled every available inch of standing space, and then some, what with the Pegasi. Higher still was a different group of Pegasi, but these weren't shoppers. These were the hard-working members of Ponyville's local weather team. Up and off, left and down, they zipped and swooshed, gathering clouds heavy with snow for tonight's big snowstorm. While she was looking up, a hoof bumped into her rump, and she nearly fell on her face. She turned with an angry pout, but the stallion who'd bumped her was too busy buying apples from a nearby cart to notice that he had kicked her. She let out a sigh and trotted along carefully, dodging those who couldn't or wouldn't bother to look down to see that there was a little unicorn in their path. By the second time she had to duck under a passing cart laden with gifts pulling by happily humming holiday shoppers, she lost her bearings in the crowd and had to clamber up a bunch of boxes to find her way through. From high on her perch she saw Miss Fluttershy at Peachy Pit's booth. The sales mare had all sorts of great fragrances burning away in little display hearts all round her booth. A scented hearth is the hallmark of a happy home, she boasted merrily to the pronounced nodding of Miss Fluttershy. Off to her left, a group of gaily clothed carolers warmed up for the evening's carousing with some hot cocoa freely offered by that clown about town, Miss Pinkie Pie. To her right, Dinky saw her Aunt Golden Harvest, selling some root vegetables and her holiday classic preserved carrot cake. This year's batch was all made in the late summer. She remembered the weekend she spent on the old family farm, shaving carrots, chopping up beets, and pitting about a gazillion cherries. Once Aunt Goldie baked them all before stacking them in old rye whiskey barrels and soaked them to the brim with red wine to keep them from going bad in the cellar for so many months. Mama said she was too young to have any just yet, since it was too boozy, but she had her fill of the cake before it was soaked back in the summer. It was okay, but nothing to shout about. Adults have weird tastes, Dinky thought to herself as she spotted her destination across the bustling sea of ponies to the Pony Express. A little unicorn hopped down and, taking careful note of her direction, ran as best as she could across the snow-covered cobblestone and through the rainbow forest of legs and wagon wheels, and smack dab into the side of the town's resident dragon. "This is it!" shouted Spike as the smaller unicorn plowed into him, knocking both into a tumbleweed of flailing limbs, fur, and scales. When her head stopped spinning, she looked up from her spot on top of the purple drake and panicked. A warm, tingly sensation wrapped itself around her like a sweater made out of static, and the world took on a magenta hue as she was lifted off of Spike and slowly set down before Princess Twilight Sparkle, who looked fit to burst with both pity and laughter. Dinky frowned. "Are you all right, Dinky?" asked the taller, prettier pony. Dinky bowed and tried to smile. I'm fine, Princess." Twilight smiled, a defeated sort of smile, and sighed. "Great, now even the kids are bowing to me." "Gee, I wonder why," grunted Spike sarcastically as he lifted himself up to his feet and dusted the snow from his helmet and knee pads. "Maybe it's because you live in the only castle in town?" Princess Twilight rolled her eyes and smirked at her dragon. "So that was it, right? That was the no good, terrible, bad thing that was going to happen?" "Huh?" asked Dinky, feeling more than a little left out of the conversation. Princess Twilight shook her head, and Dinky noticed how some of the brighter strands of her mane took longer to float back down to her neck than the others. "Spike's convinced that something terrible is going to happen." "Not just terrible, no good, terrible, bad," he said empathetically. "Why?" asked Dinky with a tilt of her head. "'Cause it's been too long." "What's been too long?" she dared to ask as her curiosity got the best of her. "It's been too long since anything bad's happened around here," he shouted, his eyes shooting from left to right as he tightened the strap of his helmet. "It has?" "No," said Princess Twilight. "That's not how casualty works." "Casualty, smashalty," dismissed Spike. "Look, it's been a month since the jackalope invasion, right?" Both ponies nodded. "And a week before that, we had the dire Parasprites, remember?" Dinky shuddered, but again she nodded. "And the week before that, well, nothing happened that week. But the week before... Princess Twilight nodded. Queen Chrysalis returned and cast a spell that made all the vegetables in Ponyville sentient. "I'll never eat peas again," said Dinky Doo, with a quivering lower lip. Spike flinched at the "look what you did" look the princess hit him with, but he soldiered on. "And before that, even more stuff happened. But it's been a month since the jackalope. Something crazy is going to happen, and soon. I could feel it in my frills." "Oh, Spike," said Princess Twilight, "it's the day before Heartswarming Eve. What could possibly go wrong?" In the distance, fading into the north, a train whistled. Dinky opened her mouth to ask something, but the sound of the market square's clock tower striking 3 in the afternoon stopped her. "Oh my gosh," she said, trotting in place and bowing over and over again. "I have to go. Sorry, your princess-ship." "That's okay. You don't have to," was all Dinky heard Princess Twilight say as she ran out of earshot back into the chaos of hooves, ice, and wheels once more. A few moments later, she was home, free through the crowd, and face to face with a new challenge, the line of ponies, half a block long, that stood unmoving before her mother's place of employment. They each stood to a pony, looking bored or angry or both, with stacks of packages destined for all corners of Equestria and parts beyond. Dinky Doo let out a low whistle as she approached the crowded front door and tried to squeeze her way in. "Hey, kid," some pony called out from behind her. She turned and looked at a peevish-looking mare in her maroon mane in a tight graying bun knotted on top of her head. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, looking right at Dinky. All the ponies were looking right at Dinky. Dinky's tail tucked up under her and brushed against her tummy self-consciously. Me?" she asked. "Yes, you. You can't just walk in there ahead of the rest of us. The back of the line is over there," she said with a dismissive toss of her head. "But The stallion standing next to Dinky looked down at her and sighed. "Look, kid, just head to the back of the line, okay? The last thing we all want is more shouting, right?" he said with a tired, pleading smile. And so Dinky Doo, defeated by a bunch of adults who wouldn't listen to what she had to say, slowly made her way to the back of the line. But she made sure to glance as hard as she could at the mare who started all this fuss over nothing. And she just smiled back like she won some kind of prize. Sometimes adults are real jerks. Dinky reached the back of the line and waited. The line moved a bit forward, and she waited some more. The clock tower back across the marketplace chimed out the quarter hour, and she waited even more. Soon, the sound of hooves coming to a stop behind her and the smell of spiced chrysanthemum drew her attention to the previously empty spot behind her, and she saw one of her favorite, most beautifulest ponies in town, Miss Rarity, the owner of her favorite shop in all of Ponyville. Miss Rarity always had an eye for the details, and she never missed anything, no matter how little. Dinky's heart was lifted when she turned and Miss Rarity was already smiling at her. "Oh, hello, Dinky Doo," she said as she set down a score of perfectly wrapped parcels that she'd been carrying in the powder blue aura of her magic. How are you this rather chilly afternoon? I'm fine, she lied. Rarity cocked an eyebrow at her omission by admission. Truly? She asked, as Dinky felt that she was being sized up and assessed like a bolt of cloth. Dinky tried her best to keep her face neutral, and after a moment, Rarity asked her, Dinky, where are your packages? Packages? Rarity nodded. Yes, well, I assume you're in line to mail something, right? Dinky frowned. No, the mean ponies in line wouldn't let me in to see my mama. Rarity balked, stumbling from the shock of it, the scandal. What? They wouldn't let you in to see your mother? She practically shouted, scooping the unicorn up in her aura and placing her on her back. Dinky wasn't used to all this magical handling from other unicorns. But at least Miss Rarity's magic didn't tingle with raw energy the way that Princess Twilight's did. Rarity pushed ahead through the line of ponies, butting her way through as she went. I cannot believe that here in Ponyville of all places, and on today, the day before Heartwarming Eve, of all days, that any pony would stop a child from seeing her mother. Cowed by her chastening words and her imperious glare, the ponies in line pouted before the furiously trotting Rarity, with a smiling and triumphant Dinky riding on her back. She was too happy to really bask in the shame that the mare who originally shouted at her wore on her face. Dinky was now certain that Miss Rarity was the best unicorn in all of Ponyville. As they reached the door, Dinky was lifted off of Miss Rarity's back and set on the worn hardwood floors of the Pony Express's stuffy interior. She hit the ground running, dodging around a lanky brown stallion with an angrily buzzing box labeled Live Bees, and shouted back to her savior as she was about to run into the loading dock. Thanks a bunch, Miss Rarity. I helped Sweetie Belle and her friend catch the big scary snow spider. Rarity midway faltered, and though Dinky didn't hear it, the pretty white unicorn asked, They're what now? Boxes stacked 10 or more high lined almost every available square foot of the space in the Pony Express's loading dock. Dinky could barely make her way through the maze of packages to where she could hear the workers in the back talking and the familiar thuds and thumps of boxes being moved from one place to another. The musty air smelt of sweat, cardboard, and packing straw, yet it brought a smile to her face. Here, in the heart of Ponyville, was one of her safe places, a place where she was always welcome and where she was always noticed. And, as if on cue, the various conversations up ahead trickled to an expectant silence. Oh, I know the sound of those hooves, said an inkly familiar voice up ahead that made Dinky gallop faster. She rounded one last corner, and there was a clearing, an oasis among cardboard and tape. Floating above the sanctuary was a small flock of Pegasi, half a dozen in all, wearing matching hats and sashes. One swooped down with a happy sigh and scooped Dinky up in a big hug. Mama! Baby girl, Dinky Doo's mama cheered as she did a lazy loop-de-loop with her favorite pony in the whole wide world. What are you doing? She stopped her question and slowed to a mid-air stop, flapping to keep the two ponies stationary as best she could. With her good eyes, she looked Dinky over, sniffing all the while. Are you wearing perfume? She asked with a slight bend in her brow. Dinky laughed and shook her head, rubbing her muzzle into the sash of her mama's chest. Miss Rarity helped me get past the line of ponies at the front door. Her mama laughed. Well, that explains that, she said with a noticeable relief as she slowly returned her daughter to the ground, but not before giving her a quick squeeze. What are you doing here? I'm always happy to see you, but wouldn't you rather be at home? Dinky kicked the ground sheepishly with a forehoof. I kind of forgot my key again. Her mama chuckled to herself. You know, when I was your age, I forgot my keys all the time, and darn near everything else. Heck, Grandpa Sprouts used to say she heard a cough from behind her, and Dinky watched as her mama spied her forgotten co-workers with her good eye before clearing her throat. Never mind what Grandpa Sprouts used to say. Come on, I'll let you take mine from my purse. Her mama started to trot past her towards the break room and tapped her on her rump with her wing, but the little filly didn't budge. Said Dinky with a start, looking around the loading dock as if the words she wanted were written on one of the boxes. What is it, baby girl? You know how you're always saying that I need to be more responsible? Her mama stopped in her tracks and turned her head. With a flick of her right ear, she nodded. Mm-hmm. Well, Diamond Tiara's cat had kittens, she said, her voice bubbling over with uncontainable excitement. An appreciable gasp went up behind Dinky, Itty-bitty kitties, said the voice. Dinky watched as her mama's good eye spotted the mare who owned the voice with a frown, and the collective silence behind them came crashing down as the air filled with sounds of boxes shuffling, wings flapping, accompanied by tuneless whistles and hums. Dinky took in a breath, and with as much courage as she could muster in her little heart, she looked her mama in the eyes and asked the day's burning question. Mama, can I have a kitten for heartswarming? Her mama's ears flattened against her head, and she sighed. Taking a step forward, she hugged the filly tight with a wing. Dinky, sweetheart, I love you, you know that, and if I could give you the world, baby girl, you know I would. Dinky looked up through threatening tears and saw the sadness in her mama's eyes reflect back. I would. Stars above, child, I would, her mama said defeatedly as her hind legs collapsed to the floor. You never go to bed hungry ever again, ever. Mama, that was only the one time You'd have it all, baby girl, she said, squeezing Dinky too tightly, but I can't. A kitten deserves a better family than one that barely feeds itself. A kitten needs toys and medicine when it's sick, and expensive vet visits even when it's healthy. I know, Dinky said, sniffling and pulling herself out of the hug. Maybe next year? Her mama asked, as she wiped her golden eye with a wing and cleared her throat. By then you'll be old enough for a real summer job on Aunt Goldie's farm, okay? Yeah, she said with a quivery voice. I just won't have the kitten I want, she finished, feeling doubly miserable for being so selfish and for not getting what she wanted. A voice cleared its throat, and mother and daughter both turned to see a buttercream-colored Pegasus offer them a sheepish smile. She was scrounging through a small bag of bits that she had been hanging from her company-issued sash. Finally chiming in, she asked, So, how much is the kitten? Dinky's heart soared, and she totally missed her mama's quietly mouthed no and head shakes behind her. Diamond Tiara is selling them for 35 bits each, but the one I want is just... Hot crackers! Exclaimed the mare, releasing her bag of bits to dangle from its purse strings. 35 bits? That's skyway robbery! Dinky's head sank once more. Come on, baby girl, said her mama, raising her to her hooves. Let's get you that key so you can get into the house. Okay, mama. Hey, said another one of her mama's co-workers as she fluttered into view just above the entrance to the break room and rubbing her chin in thought. Maybe you can get a family friend to buy the kitten you want. Dinky looked up at her with a puzzled look on her face. Huh? Well, I mean, you've got your heart set on the kitten, right? If you get a friend to buy it, then whenever you got to visit your friend, then I can visit the kitten there too, said Dinky, her spirits rekindled. Oh, that's a wonderful idea, her mama said, happily ruffling her feathers all along where her wings met her shoulders. Go ask our friends and find out who needs a kitten for Heartswarming Eve, okay? Dinky nodded, giggling as she ran out of the back into the maze of boxes towards the front of the store once more. Hey, baby girl, her mama called out after her. I'll be home after 8, so be home by then. I don't want you out in tonight's snowstorm. Okay, Mama, I love you. As the sound of her little hooves carried her out into the loading dock, Derpy smiled at her co-workers, who were gathered around smiling back. Thanks, guys, especially you, Glitters, she said, nodding to the mare who had the idea. You really saved the day there. My pleasure, Hooves, she smiled casually, waving the praise away. Now, come on, she said, while flying over the towers of boxes to a sky carriage overloaded with goodies. This delivery to Cantrell isn't going to fly itself. Derpy laughed self-consciously before taking off after her coworker. For holiday pay plus time and a half, I'd fly to Tartarus.